And good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Definitive Debates. This is the Board of Selectmen debates, sponsored by Stoughton News Group on Facebook. If you're not already a member of one of the 6,300 members, become one right now, right after the show. And you'll get the latest news and be able to express your opinions as well. And also by Snyder Stoughton each week, Fridays on the Stoughton Journal. And we have with us today 4 candidates who want to win the April 10th election. And they're going to tell you a little bit about themselves today. We have 1 minute opens, 1 minute close, 1 minute response, and a minute rebuttal time. We took cards, picked them, did a little gambling beforehand, and we have an order of, we have Peter Buckley, Steve Cavey, Peter Brown, and Bob O'Regan in that order for intros, and then outros. The closing statement will be reversed. So let's begin with the introductory statements, and Peter, you're first.
Thank you, Mark. Good evening, everyone. I'd like to first thank Jeff Pickett and Mark Snyder for moderating tonight, and also for SMAC for hosting this event. I'm looking forward to discussing the future of our community. I hope after hearing my thoughts and plans for our future, you will honor me with one of your 2 votes next Tuesday, April 10th.
Steve?
Thank you very much. My name is Steve Cavey. I'm asking for your vote on April 10th. I'm currently a selectman. I was elected during the recall election only a short while ago. But I started actually running quite a bit longer than that. I actually looked back at my Facebook records, and I started this campaign for this particular seat in this election on February 22nd, 2017. That's 404 days ago that I started running for this seat right now. I've done everything I could think of to earn your trust. During the recall election, you showed that you had faith in me, give me a chance to have that seat for a short while, for 4 months, and I hope that I've earned your trust in that time. Thank you.
Peter?
Good evening. Thank you, gentlemen, for hosting the debate. On Tuesday, April 10th, we'll have one last chance to return balance and fiscal responsibility back to the Board of Selectmen. It's critical that I get elected so I can continue to protect, defend, and represent your voices, your interests, and concerns. Tonight, I hope to earn your trust. I look forward to having a fair and honest debate, and I'll do my best to answer questions tonight so you can do your best next week at the ballot box. Thank you.
Bob?
Well, again, thank you, both of you, for hosting this, and thank all of you for watching. I'd like to ask you to bear in mind 3 questions tonight when you hear from all of us. 1, for myself, who am I? The second question, what is this election about? And the third one is, why should you vote for any of the candidates? And I'd like to focus on, since I'm running and asking for your vote on April 10th, why I'd ask for your vote. Who am I? I'm a father of 2 children, born and raised in Stoughton, attended Stoughton Public Schools, kindergarten through 12th grade, both doing very well. My wife and I moved here 34 years ago because it's a great community, because it's a great place to raise children. And the happiness of our children, their success proves that. What is this election about? This election, think about it. You as a property owner, as a resident of the town, have a stake in a business that's a $130 million business a year. The election is about who do you trust to run that business for you. Thank you.
Okay.
So, first of all, I appreciate the Admiral Stockdale somewhat reference there with who am I. I'm glad you answered it, though, as opposed to him not doing that when he ran for vice president several years ago. So
I didn't know we were playing trivia. Good.
But also, Mark, it's good to see you, and even better to see you with a shirt on, as I'm sure many of your Facebook fans can attest.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I was going to take it off. No, I can't do it.
So no, we're PG.
Okay. All right.
So anyways, getting into seriousness, just adding some levity to the moment. I don't like to usually ask individual questions, and I apologize if I feel like I'm putting you on the spot, but Peter Buckley, I'd just like to give you the opportunity, if you so choose. If you want, this is your first public appearance since the Enterprise story that addressed a controversial Facebook post, and I just want to give you, if you want, the opportunity to address that. If not, we'll move on with the debate.
I mean, there's not much more I can add to it. I mean, I did, in my response to the Enterprise article and to all the Facebook rhetoric that was out there. Basically, in a nutshell, is I owned it. I did something back in 2012. I posted a picture up there. When I was called on it then, I took it down. Haven't heard from it about it or anything about it since then. I apologize now for it, and it's time to move on. That's what I'm going to do. It's move on and answer the questions. I don't think it's a question that should be asked at this point that's going to make me any different of a candidate or a better candidate than anybody else sitting here. So,
All right, let's get into the questioning.
First one we'll actually ask is to Peter. So,
All right, so let's just go through some of current events going on with the Board of Selectmen meetings right now. And one of them is Recycle Works, which is a recycling facility that wants to come to 220 Cushing Street. And I can't recall over the last, I'd say, 6 or 7 years, a business coming to town that has drawn the interest or concern, for that matter, from both the selectmen and school committee. Normally this would come before the zoning board, which it will this Thursday if you're watching live, April 5th. I wanted to get each of your takes on that business coming to town and what you feel the town should be doing to support this business or prevent a business like this from coming to town in the future. So it's kind of a long question, but we'll start with you, Peter.
it's going to be in the wrong location. First of all, it's not a matter of me saying it's a type of business that shouldn't be in the town. It just shouldn't be in that location. It's going to be right in the backyard of a brand new $120 million high school, and directly across the street from the middle school. The traffic that's going to incur is going to be tremendous. And the infrastructure, the way it is now, the way they plan on it, and I did attend a meeting, I think it was before the Board of Selectmen, when they were just they were doing a presentation. And they said that the trucks will be coming up through Canton Street side. Well, trying to get a truck or an 18-wheel truck up that street, from Canton Street into that facility, it's going to be next to impossible without some major infrastructure done on that area. It's just basically there are other places in town that can be located. And that's the idea. The Board of Selectmen should be helping them try to find that. If they want this business to come into town, then help them try to find another location that's suitable for what they need.
Steve?
Yeah, I mostly agree with Mr. Buckley. In fact, when we met with Recycle Works, we were advocating for finding a better location for them. We have a couple of problems though with this process. First of all, the problems that people point to, trucks, potential hazardous smells or things like that, hazardous waste, they're legitimate. But unfortunately, that area is actually zoned to have those things. If a packaging company wanted to open up a distribution center in that area, they could, and there would be no special permit required. If a industrial dry cleaner wanted to open up a facility there, the area is zoned for that, and they wouldn't need a special permit. The fact is that we have several levels of problems. We have a long-term problem that area shouldn't be zoned for industrial. We have a short to medium range problem of this particular company getting snagged by just a very minute use that they need, a special permit. This doesn't allow them to be there. We're hoping to find them a better place, though.
Peter?
Well, it's a business I wouldn't support from across from the school, even if it wasn't a $125 million brand new high school we're putting there. There's a middle school and elementary school there. So the traffic concerns there, we all know, those of us that are parents picking up kids from there, it's dangerous to begin with. To add trucks, 25, 30 trucks more a day, that's a problem. But then again, I worry about the concerns of the freight. We have 3 railroad crossings there. It backs up to the business that I think we're talking about, the building backs up to a railroad tracks. I don't want to encourage freight and ways to get rid of the waste through trains. So my thought is the Board of Selectmen, who I don't know if they're supporting this project or not, it's not their particular job to prevent it from coming or stop it from coming, but it's to work with or to help department heads through the town manager maybe find a desired or a better desired or a suitable location for this type of business. Makes more sense. Thank you.
Bob?
So the Recycle Work project really draws together a number of the issues that are going on in town that we haven't paid enough attention to, that we need to put more energy into. I'm not going to get into why it's an unsuitable location. Others have done that pretty well. Why is it an unsuitable location for an industrial use? Looking at the zoning map, we could have, would have, should have known that wasn't the appropriate place for a long time. Can they, should they go in another location? Yes. Do we want businesses like this in town? Absolutely. Do we need to make sure we have suitable places for them? We do. Are we doing enough of that? No. I'll give you an example. And it all ties together, because tying together is we bring in tax base like this. That means homeowners get a break on their taxes. That means we can pay for services, we can pay for better schools. So we have to pay attention and be proactive. Campanelli Industrial Park is a place where this project would be well suited. There's capacity in that place. It can't go there because they don't have sewer. We have a way of putting sewer into that location that wouldn't really cost the taxpayers much. These connect. We haven't paid attention to doing that. If we did, we'd be able to solve this problem.
Thank you. Anybody else have a rebuttal to that they want to add to it? No?
Well, I think I'd add that Mr. O'Regan points out that there are suitable locations. That makes a very good point to the matter. But the only problem I have is that there isn't sewer up in Park Street area now, or in these industrial parks that can help. And I guess I'd ask, how do we do that without costing taxpayers additional money? Because I know I'm all for creating economic development, particularly with business, to give the taxpayers a break. But how do we get that done without costing taxpayers? Because I know the initial subject was like a $5 million project or something.
Yeah, I can answer that.
Please.
Here's the answer. Number one, you have to look at all of these projects and do a cost-benefit analysis, because the cost-benefit analysis on Campanelli Industrial Park and that zone is that sewer, particularly for business and commercial property, would increase the property values 3 times. That means we get 3 times the tax revenue off of those properties. You plan your betterments so that you leverage the additional tax revenue to help defray the cost. That's one thing. The other thing is you look at the overall economic development, overall tax improvement for that area. If we zoned it right, the additional sewer service would allow better, higher use, for example, office parks, professional, that can't go there because they don't have the capacity. We have a restaurant and we have an Alzheimer's care facility. Both have tremendous disposal problems. Public health issues we need to take care of. So you need to do the cost-benefit analysis, you apply the benefit against some of the costs, and you work it out. Finally, there's a program called, under state statute, Chapter 23L, that allows development by volunteers, such as this infrastructure. It's off the tax base. All of those things are things we're working on now to make it happen.
Yeah, I have one rebuttal. That's all good and well, but why now is this a priority and not 6 years ago? Why wasn't this something that was spotlighted? This has always been a problem up there. But it seems like this year it's really become a bigger problem. Why not 6 years ago? Why couldn't we put the efforts in then?
I'll answer that. It was a priority 6 years ago. I tried to get it done 6 years ago. There was resistance on the Finance Committee 6 years ago. So we went to work to find a new way to do it that didn't cost the taxpayers. So about 2.5 years ago, our Economic Development Officer came up with an approach under Chapter 23L so it wouldn't be a burden on the taxpayer. There's been efforts to design and to develop that so that it could go through. There's a way to have that done that it doesn't hurt the taxpayer. And for the past 2 years or so, it's been impossible to get this kind of issue on the agenda for the Board of Selectmen to pay attention to. Everybody on this table knows that to be the fact. The difference between then and now is these are the issues we are paying attention to, we're going to wrap our arms around, and we're going to do it.
I got to say something because I feel like that was a direct shot at me. I was on the Board of Selectmen and I was on FinCom, and I opposed Mr. O'Regan's mandatory request or policy to force residents. I can tell you up on Park Street there's a large number of residents that are not interested in hooking up or being told that they have to hook up to sewer. So I don't think we can offset the tax base, or it doesn't increase their property if they're first off against it. I'm completely familiar with the program he's talking about the federal assistance that Town of Stoughton can apply, but it's a very limited number of money that's available in the event that you get approved for it. So it's not like it's an instant boom, you get the sewer done and you're going to have everybody up there looking to hook in or whatever. So to have any type of mandatory policy to hook in, whether that be sewer or water, I oppose. And most of the residents that I talk to also oppose.
And I need to respond to that. The program I'm talking about is a state statute, Chapter 23L, not a federal statute. This does not involve federal monies. It involves voluntary participation by property owners. Chapter 23L is an all-voluntary program. There's nothing mandatory about it. Many of the businesses and many of the property owners are in favor of this. They could voluntarily participate. The line would be down the street if later on some of the property owners chose to put in. For example, you had a failed septic or cesspool, which is a problem there. Those failed systems, instead of having to do Title V remediations, which we know can cost upwards of $25,000, could voluntarily tie in. It's important to understand the difference. Volunteer means nobody forces you, and there is nothing about my proposal that included forcing anybody to tie into this sewer. It's all voluntary.
Well, that's 8 days before an election. There's no mandatory, but there was a couple of years back into his term on the Board of Selectmen. And I'll tell you right now, I can find the actual documents that show that. But on top of that, there's a limited amount of monies available. Mr. O'Regan points to monies that are voluntarily. Yeah, they are, but it's a limited amount, I think somewhere around $400,000. And there are hundreds of people that this would affect up there. So I don't know how they'd all be required for this voluntary money, but I don't know if you want to stay on the subject or move on.
No, I think that we don't want the debate to go down the sewer that quickly. So
Right.
we'll save it for that. The next question is going to Steve, and it's coming from me. A lot of people writing on social media have been talking for years about the downtown, the theater, the parking, all the different things going down there, and it doesn't seem like anything's getting done.
Yeah.
What's your response to that, and is there anything the selectmen can do to make that square something that's welcoming when people come from Easton and get greeted by what they get greeted by?
Oh yeah, there's absolutely something that the selectmen can do, and we've already started doing a lot of work that will head us in that direction. A lot of the downtown development has been stalled because of our zoning laws that came into existence shortly before the markets crashed in 2007. Sorry, the markets crashed in 2008, and I think that our zoning laws, the SHMUD was codified in 2007. So they were designed for very different environments. In the last 5 years, I think there's only been 4 programs of development in the downtown that have taken advantage of those zoning laws, and they're outdated. They're not giving us what we're looking for. You know, they haven't produced the benefits that we hope they would, and so it's time to revise them. And I think that we can address that. A lot of one of the main concerns people have had has actually been with the burnt building in the middle of town. It's been there for 10 years, and development's been stalled on that for a very long time. It's all related to just a handful of parking spaces, and the idea that could happen, that we could be stuck because of 2 parking spaces, is something we can fix.
Well, the first thing we can't do is become in the real estate business. And this Board of Selectmen is talking about purchasing everything from downtown, from the theater to the post office. Everything that they talk about downtown is, well, we got to buy this to do this. No, we need to look at private companies. Now, the way you get them in there is that you actually go out there and you try to find that. Now, I know we have an economic development officer who has been attempting to focus on downtown, but hasn't been swift enough. We had a building ready to go in the Malcolm and Parsons, and 2 residents, chairman on the CPC and somebody on the SRA, prevented that building from going forward because of open space requirement of 10%. So any building, any development that goes on down there, because of the zone and the way it is, requires 10% of open space. So we limit ourselves right there and then to what you can actually do. And a lot of businesses aren't coming in to create green space for the open. Now, I know that's the utopia that a lot of people want to have. We have a ton of open space in the town of Stoughton. But I think we need to look at building private-public partnerships.
Bob?
The Board of Selectmen now is focusing on bringing the downtown back. There's basically 3 problems with the downtown. Well, the first one that anybody knows about is trying to drive through the downtown is like trying to swim through an egg beater. It's just not possible to do. The second is zoning, and 2 levels of that. One is what can you do there, and how many competing zoning districts there are for commercial activity. If you look at the zoning map, if you drive up Washington Street, it's anything, anywhere, almost all the time. So you can't have businesses concentrated in a downtown if you let them spread out everywhere. That's what we did. As far as ownership, the post office site to develop into green space is a policy adopted by the planning board, adopted by the Board of Selectmen, and accepted by the State Department of Housing and Community Development to revitalize the downtown. Why? Because we want to make the downtown someplace where people want to go. They don't want to go there. Making it look good is part of it. So the policy for the post office is to make it good space using open space money that we already have. It's not about
Peter?
affordable housing.
Time's out.
Everybody talks about the zoning in the downtown. Yeah, there's some changes that need to be done with the zoning, but do you have to rewrite the whole downtown zoning? No. Some of the ideas that were done back in the day were not all that bad, have been tried in other communities. We just, and I've said it before, we just didn't have the infrastructure to support it at the time. So, are there some outdated zoning issues within the downtown? Possibly. So let's take a look at them. Amending takes way less time than trying to recreate the wheel. We don't have to do it. The downtown has been this way for not just the past 10 years. It's been a problem for over 60 years. No matter what you do, you can completely change the zoning every time that everybody complains about something on the downtown. Use the existing zoning, amend it, make it better. The green space is what they're talking about, the 10% downstate. That might be one of the issues that you might want to do to attract better business to the downtown. We have to attract them in. Parking is the other issue. As far as the post office is concerned, as far as purchasing it, I don't think we need to. I think we can use it for our downtown parking issues.
Does anybody want to add anything to what their answers were?
I'd like to add about the post office that I don't believe the taking of the post office was ever funded, or we ever put any money aside to fund that. We also have the traffic issues that Mr. O'Regan alludes to, something that everybody knows of, and we have money and still sitting, I believe, to redesign some of that traffic. In fact, we had several studies done, and one in particular sits currently, well, I believe on our engineer's desk. Actually, he's acting interim town manager. He has money available at this moment to correct some of that downtown traffic issue, or to help with the downtown issues. First off, we have 3 highways that meet there. The state is never going to just allow us to do something radical in terms of changing the flow of the traffic and what goes on. But we also had $250,000 from the state available for us development downtown, and I believe this current board wants to put it towards the purchase of the post office. I don't know if Mr. O'Regan can correct me if I'm right on that or wrong.
While you were on the board, Mr. Brown, the board voted to dedicate that to acquiring and relocating the post office, because that position is a central aspect of the master plan economic development component for the downtown. You know, we spent probably $100,000 or more on an economic development plan for the downtown that really vetted all these issues. A central problem with the downtown is it's not a place people want to come and do business with and live in. Why? Look at it. I mean, just look at it. So what can you do to make it a better place to live? And one of them is to look at a parking lot and turn it into something that's a happier place, like a park, and reuse and repurpose that space. It is government policies, right? Look at how we allowed commercial activity to disperse through the town. We deconcentrated it. It's government policies that made the situation the way it is. So government has to be part of the solution, only to the point, and only to the point of getting private investment to take off. Nothing more.
Well, if luck would have it, I was on the board and I voted against using the $250,000 for the post office. I believe it was a 3-1 vote. And I will also mention that luck has it again, because I believe the board's currently talking about purchasing that piece of parcel for $1. I'd like to get confirmation. Is that true to that, or I heard that at FinCom?
Absolutely our goal. For
Is
$1.
that an agreement, or is that just a goal and a wish list? People should know, the taxpayers should know, because you do most of your business in executive session. I'd like to know, and so would residents that ask me to find out, is that building being under agreement for $1 through the congressman that you guys have cited that you're using to get this done?
It's not yet under agreement for $1. If there's any way to get it for $1, we will get it for $1.
And any other building for $1, I would do the same.
Anybody else?
Sure, please. Oh, thank you. Why do we have to relocate the post office? It's a building that's already standing there. Why can't we just move them over to a small section? They don't need to utilize the whole building that's there. It's not a hub anymore. So why can't we just move them over to a certain part of that? And as far as making the parking lot a park, why not utilize it for what it already is? Parking. What the downtown desperately needs, away from the downtown and the traffic that flows through there. If you try to put parking over by Randolph Savings, they still have to cross the road twice. 2 highways, 27, 138 to get over to that side. It's dangerous. Keep it the way it is. It's used for parking. Be smart about that. That will start. That will start attracting businesses. Businesses don't want to come there because they don't get the business because there is no parking and people are not going to walk down or try to park on the street side of the town. Utilize what you already have. It's the best way to go. It's the cheapest way to go right at this point. If better ideas come down the line, it buys you that time to get to those better ideas.
Steve, did you want to say
Yeah,
something?
I did. I feel like I've heard a lot of negativity. Don't do this, don't change that. State will never give us money for this. It's time to do something bold. It's time to change something. We can't wait anymore. It's been long enough, and we have to start making decisions that are going to head us in the right direction. I think we've already done that. If I'm elected, if the town doesn't see drastic change in a single term, then I would consider that a failure. And we have to see it now. We have to see it absolutely right now. We're done waiting. We're done with excuses. It's time to do something bold and to make the change.
On the contrary, I don't think they're excuses. I think it's something. If you're talking about there's changes to be made, what are the changes? What are the changes that this board is proposing now that's going to help that downtown? We're not hearing anything, really. We're hearing what needs to be done, but what are you doing? That's the question.
And I'd like to add, if I'm not cutting you off,
No, please.
I'd like to add that I heard the other night that the purchase of the post office was vital to the development of downtown. And my question I wanted to ask through FinCom was, what is one commitment or one business? The selectman here, Mr. O'Regan, got 6 years on, so you're very much part of the solution as well as the problem. You've recently been elected. What business, if any, have committed to come downtown? You must have somebody an idea. Help us. Share with me. Is it not just a couple buildings we've been talking about development for years and haven't been accomplished? I don't know what you find funny. I'm just curious. Vital to the development of downtown.
I didn't realize you could change the format of the debate.
Why not?
Getting back to the format of the
Questions.
debate, which is the questions come from the moderator.
No. We can ask each other questions.
Not right now.
No.
No?
No,
Oh,
no.
there's a certain
No, no.
time?
Yeah.
There is a
I'll
certain
remember
bylaw.
to ask that. Let me write that in my memory.
And we're talking about one particular thing, the downtown. Does anybody else?
I
have
do.
any-
Yes.
Go ahead, Bob.
Pay attention to what's going on here for the first time in years. Okay. Because this Board of Selectmen is paying attention to a particular proposal for a particular reuse of the downtown that makes a lot of sense based on all of the citizens who participated in the master plan forums, on the experts the town hired to advise us on what to do to bring the downtown back, on the planning board that voted unanimously to approve this plan, on the Board of Selectmen that voted to approve this plan and send it to the state, and the state that's accepted it. We're talking about it. Right now on the agenda for town meeting, this option is on the agenda for town meeting to decide to get going. That hasn't happened before. It didn't happen for 2 years, in the past 2 years of the Board of Selectmen, and the Downtown Economic Development Plan that we are acting on was submitted to the Board of Selectmen on December 16th, 2016, and couldn't even get a hearing from the prior board. Yeah, so I think the townspeople are tired of doing nothing, and we're working on it.
All right, folks.
I'll rebuttal on that. I mean, you're talking about the same master plan that was in effect when the zoning laws were changed the first time. They failed then. I don't see how it's going to make any difference now. As far as the last 2 years, if we're going to keep holding our hat on that, then that just comes down to a personality conflict. And if that's what held it up for the past 2 years, then shame on all of you, because that should not have happened, and we wasted 2 years.
One correction, this is not the same master plan when the zoning bylaw was approved. In fact, this master plan was instigated and finally adopted because the prior zoning doesn't work. And one of the major recommendations of this master plan is to fix all of the out-of-date, inadequate zoning that, among other things, has parents and townspeople concerned that a recycling center is going across from a middle school and a high school next to a neighborhood zone. This master plan says we have to fix that stuff. This master plan is not what the current zoning bylaw was based on, and people who are elected to the Board of Selectmen need to know that.
Okay, we're going to go right to the next question. This one's going to go to Steve, and Jeff's going to ask it.
So let's talk about another building downtown that gets a lot of lip service, but not a lot of things being done to it, and that's the fire station on Freeman Street. What can you do, or what can the Board of Selectmen do over the next 3 years? Concrete things that can get that project underway. What are your plans for a short-term and a long-term solution to that station, which is almost in disrepair?
Station 1?
Yes,
It's
Freeman Street.
Yeah, Station 1, the fire station on Freeman Street. It served its purpose. It's time to go. That is we cannot have our firemen operating out of that firehouse any longer. There's currently some work being done by our interim town manager. He's identified a number of town-owned properties that are not being used in any way. They're not bringing in tax revenue. We're not using them. Nobody's using them. There's about 109 foreclosed properties that belong to the town. We can auction those off, use that money towards a new public safety building, and I think that doing that immediately, starting the process of that immediately, is necessary. We need to get our firemen, our police officers, into buildings that work for the modern era.
Peter?
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned properties, because that was one of the things that I led the charge with, is worked with the treasurer's office and another selectman and the town manager at the time to pursue some of the $75 million worth of property, over 600 parcels that the town of Stoughton has, that doesn't pay any to our tax roll, if you will. So first thing we could do is make it a priority. The fire station's been talked about. Everybody that wants to get elected talks about, well, we got to make it a priority. We come in here and they say, we'll do it, and then other things go up all around it. The mention of other additional school buildings and things of this nature. There's some opportunity behind, from what I understand, a businessman that owns property behind the fire station. He's interested in selling off and making some type of trade. This can all be negotiated. We have seasoned veterans on this board, along with the town manager, that can talk to this businessman and maybe look at refurbishing that station, from ground up. Or there are plenty of other nice locations, whether you want to talk about the Armory or the nice lot up on 138. That could be a good place to start.
Bob?
The immediate need for the fire station is to make it habitable, in large part safe for the men and women who work there. That's being done. This Board of Selectmen has proposed, and we've received an opinion by Town Council, a way to fund getting that property put back in place, because whatever we do in the longer term, we need to make that facility usable. And that's one of the items for this coming annual town meeting to address. Close to $1 million in work on that building, which, in my opinion, we shouldn't need to do, because we could have, should have, would have paid attention to that building 20 or 25 years ago. But the work we're doing will be for this use and the next use. We're not going to dissipate the money. Second is, probably the beginning of May, we will have a departmental improvement plans presented by the police and the fire to address staffing. Who do you need and what do you need them to do? Training, how do you keep them up and running? Equipment, right? What equipment do you need? And facilities. And from that, we will develop an overall plan for both public safety departments that include a building.
Thanks, Bob. Peter?
I'm hearing of what we should have done. Auctioning off properties that we have in foreclosure and tax foreclosure. It's great. We should have been doing that all along. But that's wasted time. The priority of this town meeting, for the most part in the public safety sector, if not one of the top priorities, was that fire station. It should have been a priority. We don't need to purchase other pieces of land for green space or anything else right at this moment. We need to make that building safe for the people that work in that building. There's many ways we can do it. Keep the tradition, keep it in the same location is my thought, and keep the original station, which was the bigger bays, not bays 1 and 2, but the other bays that are in there. Because that was built as a fire station. Back when it was the blueprints stated, and the blueprints are still in the fire department to that building. Keep it that way. Use the money for the renovation of that building. It can be done. But not when we go out and try to buy other pieces of property that we're just like Glen Echo, we're just going to sit there and do nothing. We don't need it. It's a waste.
Okay.
I'd like to add something about that. Last spring, when I was on the Board of Selectmen, I suggested to the board, I had met with a developer who was interested in building us this building, a state-of-the-art fire station or public safety building. The developer all was interested, would build it. In fact, I believe the state police is having a building done now by the same developer. I'm not going to mention the developer because we couldn't come to an agreement. But I suggested potentially we have the private building built, and then we maybe make some sort of deal. We offered land or sold it for very cheap, and then we could lease back the building, have the building built for us in a location that we owned, and build that private-public partnership. So that was an option that we could look at and still could potentially look at going forward.
Anybody else? Bob?
I think we received an opinion that the proposal for this public-private partnership is illegal under Massachusetts procurement law for municipal governments. In fact, that idea had been floated for the police station at a previous town meeting and voted down. It's a procedure that is legal in other states. It's not legal in Massachusetts, from what we've been told.
And I will say that I've never seen a legal opinion, but if Mr. O'Regan says that's what we received, I do know that there was a resident who was very much involved in the building part of it. He was a little concerned that that may be an issue, but I've never seen a legal opinion for that, but I'm not going to doubt that that is the case. But
We're going to go on to the next question, and this is for Peter Brown, and Jeff will ask.
So let's talk about, I would say it was the predominant topic at the Thursday Board of Selectmen's meeting. I believe the date on that was March 29th. It was Amazon. And there was a report out that Amazon, which had promised the town 125 full-time jobs, has only fulfilled about 70 of those. This was according to a report. Pam McCarthy, who's the Economic Development Coordinator, came before the board and presented a lot of facts about Amazon. I actually encourage anybody who missed that meeting to make sure you watch it on SMAC or on our website, stoughtontv.com. I want to get each of your take on Amazon, because a large agreement was made to alleviate their tax load when they were coming into town, to pretty much entice them to come to Stoughton. So I want to get your take on the Amazon-Stoughton partnership. Is Stoughton getting bang for its buck?
Before you answer, just one thing I want to let everybody know. There are 2 full-time employees at Amazon from Stoughton right now. 2. Good.
well, that's a great question, and I'm glad you asked it, because I believe, first off, Amazon's building, their business model is to get what they can and to dupe the taxpayers if they can. They came in here several years ago. I was on FinCom. I disagreed with the TIF agreement at that point, because I took the time to look around and see what other communities had for TIF agreements, and Amazon had an outstanding deal from our town manager and 1 or 2 selectmen. I don't know if it was Mr. O'Regan that was involved, but town manager negotiated a deal, gave them a great deal, which was supported, I will agree. It was supported by most of FinCom and town meeting, because it was tax property being at least paid on for the equipment inside the building, even though they got 100% the first year in their the actual property tax. They also, I called the public affairs office and tried to find out how many employees they had, because they told us 125. At least 40 of them would be good paying jobs, full-time jobs with, at least 45,000. I'll finish up on my second time.
Bob?
I'm not happy with full-time employment. What we've been told is that they changed their model for that facility from when it was presented on the TIF to how it's being used, from a model that had more full-time to more part-time workers. From the viewpoint of the town and the Board of Selectmen, we really can't be controlling how employers hire or fire, although we need to supervise how TIF agreements are implemented. This TIF agreement needs to be supervised more, and we're doing that. Amazon will be back in front of the board probably April 31st, maybe. We're still working on the schedule with a representative from Amazon to address these issues. Bear in mind that the TIF agreement it deals with personal property that was an empty building. So this was tax revenue we weren't getting anyway, because there was no personal property being paid on personal property that doesn't exist in an empty building. What we do have is real estate taxes in excess of $400,000 in a building that's appreciated.
Time's up. Peter?
It is an issue. It should have been looked at more. The law states in this, and this was in that article as well, that states that they promised these so many employees, but the law states that we only have to deliver half. Okay, so that should have been looked at beforehand. A little bit more due diligence should have been put in behind that to note, because that law didn't come out after that. The TIF agreements were made. We're still losing money on that, and the Amazon has to be held accountable for it. they definitely have to be held accountable for it. It's disgusting. We have a lot of issues in this town, a lot of people that could use that work, full-time work right now. Let's make them, even though, the law states what it states, we can still hold their feet to the fire, and it should be done.
So the partnership with Amazon it's not been perfect. The number I had for full-time employees was 79.
That is the number that she gave. Sorry to interrupt.
79
Pam McCarthy.
full-time employees. So that means that they fall short by about 46 employees, but full-time employees. During the presentation, Ms. McCarthy mentioned that during the peak season they have about 1,500 part-time employees coming through. Also, I think they have about $30 million worth of work done, equipment, and they use local vendors to do a lot of the work in that plant. They've done, I think, an okay job, or even maybe a good job, but I don't think we should make the perfect be the enemy of the good. The fact is that our partnership it definitely needs some improvement, and we're going to we're going to work with them to find those improvements. Thank you.
Anybody else have anything they
I just
want to
want
add?
to emphasize that the purpose of a TIF agreement is to bring business into town that can add to the tax base. That's the purpose of it. And this particular improvement has worked. We have a building that has had investment of nearly $5 million more than what was told the town would get at the time the building went in. I mean, at Amazon went in. So they've added and they've improved the value of the building by between $4 and $5 million. That has added property tax. We're getting $88,000 more a year in property taxes on that building than we were before. We got $250,000 in permitting and fees that we never would have got before. There are ancillary benefits for that large employment base that are helping the town in other businesses. All of that helps the tax base. And the other thing to remember is that we compete for the location of these added commercial taxpayers with every other community in the state and all across the country. And we have to bear in mind it's not a perfect world, but we're not going to get the businesses if we don't realize the competition.
Thanks.
I'll add one more to that. Amazon was a tricky issue. I mean, it definitely was. But yeah, they competed, and a lot of towns competed for the Amazon's business. But when you really look at it, if the right agreements were in place and we were right on top of everything, most of those places want to come to the Stoughton area because of its locality. You have 138, 128, 495, 95, 27, 139, all of those routes, most of them, all of which commercial routes. They go right through the town, most of them, or go adjacent to the town, more so than any other community that surrounds us. We need to make it more attractive for these businesses. Amazon's one. There's one. Let's keep going and get more in here. We need it to offset our tax base, our residential tax base. It's getting too high. It's getting too high to the point where the elderly right now at this place cannot afford to stay in their homes. That can't be done. These are the people that built this town. We need to keep them here.
We're going to keep this on point. So we're talking about Amazon here. So this is the part where Jeff and I actually get to relax a minute, and you guys are going to ask the questions. And the first person that's going to ask the question is going to be Bob. And you will ask it to the other three members, and then we're going to go, and Peter will ask, and then and we're going to go right through. Steve, Peter, right around. And everybody was going to have a chance to ask a question and then answer it. Bob, your question for the rest of the board.
What's the most important issue facing the town? And what have you done, and what will you do to address it?
Peter Buckley, you'll answer first.
Is there any one specific thing that's important to? All the issues are important to this town. They are. You can take any one. The tax issue is an important issue to the town. The public safety is a big issue to the town. We've discussed quite a few of them on this one. Well, what I do is hit the ground running coming out of the gate with some experience on how to fix these issues. Fix it right off the bat. Get our feet going on this. No more putting too many committees putting together to do the results that the Board of Selectmen can do on their own. That needs to be done. That's what we need to start doing right away. Like I said, we are loaded down with many issues. To put one on top of the other, I think it would be a little bit unfair at this point because they all have to be addressed.
Okay. Steve?
Yeah, I'm always in search of the silver bullet, right? The one change you can make that will fix everything, and so few problems actually have have that silver bullet. But I think there's something that comes pretty close, and I've mentioned it several times here. And I believe it's zoning. I think that I would work to expedite zoning changes really as fast as possible. They represent our values. They represent our needs as a community, and they're difficult to change. There's a lot of turnaround to make a change, but those changes can have a substantial impact on an area. It's sort of like farming. You have to create an environment for certain things to grow, and that environment is set by our zoning. So what I would change is that, and we've already taken many steps to do this. We've talked to the planning board, had them look at our zoning. We have a master plan that has knowledgeable recommendations on zoning that we've actually had an opportunity to consume. And I keep on working towards that.
Peter
Thanks.
Brown?
Well, first off, one of my biggest issues is public safety and making certain that we have adequate public safety, which when I was on the board, we took the necessary steps to address. Not only did we add staffing, and the fire department is now being addressed as we speak, we added a second ambulance to increase our services. And not only did we add a second ambulance to be in service, we increased the billing, and therefore we're actually addressing some of our shortages through the fire department, bringing in more money by having a second ambulance, which pays dividends all around. One of the things I'd like to see get done right away, and if I get elected on next Tuesday, I'm going to ask the town manager to instruct the DPW to get around and start getting some of the brush off the sides of these streets that came down in the last storms. There's brush all over the place that is creating a public safety issue for, I know, seniors and other people and some children walking to school. It's all over the town. We need to get it policed and cleaned up, whether that requires a couple units of the DPW.
Okay, thank you. Peter Buckley, it's your turn to ask a question.
When I get to
Bob
answer my own
answered some
question?
questions.
You're going to ask your own question, okay. Go. I forgot.
The biggest issue facing the town is leadership on the Board of Selectmen to make sure that we identify and prioritize the things that we need to do. You get a sense of that from the answers that we've heard, particularly from the challengers here, because there's been a lack of ability to identify and prioritize. Hit the ground running to do everything all at the same time but not know what we're going to do would be a problem. To identify and prioritize means that you establish goals, you put a team together to get them done, and you actually achieve them. That's what we're trying to do now on this Board of Selectmen. And if you watch the meetings, you will see that we are doing it. In terms of what do you do with identifying and prioritizing, the key component on that is tax relief for the homeowner, and that is achieved through land use reform, as of right development, so businesses can come into this town without spending years and tens of thousands of dollars getting permits. Those are key. Identify and prioritize.
Okay, thank you. And now it'll be Peter's turn to ask his question.
Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry about that, Bob.
It's okay. When do we get to ask you questions?
This is basically, this could go off to everybody, almost everybody that's sitting on this board. What do you feel that was left unfinished as a result of the recall that any of you can hit the ground running to deliver results?
Steve?
Listen to me. The major concern I had during the entire course of the recall, during which I was a candidate, was that the social impacts of that, the cultural impacts of it, could be very severe. And I felt like, even after winning that election, it was somewhat pyrrhic, because I was concerned that there were a lot of people who lost that election, and it was a good number of people who didn't vote for a recall, and ensuring that they felt like they could come back into the tent, we could work together, was really essential to me, and it's been something I've been focusing on since getting elected, is reaching out to people from the community of people I know who didn't vote for the recall, and reaching out to them, getting their opinion, bringing them in, telling them, sincerely, I care about what they have to say. And I want to continue that work. I want to make sure that we can come together as a community. I think we'll all be better off for it.
Peter?
Well, first off, I'll say leadership is not about just agreeing and shaking your head and agreeing with every issue that's raised by the chair. And I'd like to mention that there were 3 people that were affected there's an entire town affected by the recall, but there were 3 people that were vilified and talked about and made to be look like they didn't care about this town. I haven't met, I'll tell you the truth, the 2 other gentlemen I served with, I have never met. There's no one on this board or serving that I know that gave more to the town of Stoughton. One man served over 40 years given to the town of Stoughton, and I don't think it was fair on some of the attacks that were levied against him. And I also think the other gentleman, although not as astute in his delivery, cared very deeply about this town. And I think to be sitting here now and to talk about what I would do if I got reelected is I would take the same position, I would make the same decisions, because the decisions I made, along with those other 2, and they weren't always just with the 2, people talk about, oh, it was 3 against 2. Well, I see a board that agrees and shakes their head to 5 every time the chairman speaks.
All right, thank you. Bob?
I think there's 2 ways to take your question. What was left unfinished as a result of the recall was the question. And I think you could take that as meaning what work was going on by the Board of Selectmen that board constituted didn't get to finish. And the other one is, as I think the other speakers have talked, what is it? I think I have to agree that the 3 members who were recalled loved the town, were devoted to the town. And what was left unfinished was thanking them for the time and attention that they paid to the town, even though there were a lot of disagreements in what happened. And that gets to the first one, which is what was left unfinished. I think that a driving force behind the recall was that the work of the town wasn't being done effectively and efficiently. And what this board can do to bear that in mind is to pick up the unfinished work and get it done, and we're determined to do that.
Okay, I'm not going to forget this time. Peter, you answer your own question.
To answer the question, it was brought up earlier that the town and this board lacks leadership. To the taxpayers of the town, leadership comes, they look at the whole board, all 5 members as the leaders, not just one individual member of the board. So if it was leadership that was, that's been lacking, then it's been lacking by all 5 members of the board, and not just by one individual. And that has been brought up in the past, and that's directed towards the recall as well. To hit the ground running, to deliver results, is to understand that the fact that I would be one member of a 5-person board, and I would collectively be working with those members to move this town forward. And that's on every aspect of the town. Doesn't matter what it is. I don't see as anybody's one person. I see the leadership of the chairperson as setting the agenda for the meeting, and pretty much it. It's the rest of the board that will conduct the business that's necessary for this town.
Steve?
Sure.
It's
So
your
the question-
turn to ask a question, and Peter Brown will be the first one to answer it.
So I was curious. What is the main obstacle that you face during your current campaign, and what did you do to deal with it?
I don't understand what you're asking.
Well, yeah, you're campaigning right now. What was your main obstacle during this campaign? And what
Well,
did you do?
this is my 3rd campaign in less than 4 years. I ran the first year in 2015, came in 4 out of 4 candidates. Mr. Regan was one of the victors. I ran in 2016 as a write-in candidate against the sit-in chairman at the time, and I won. And I campaigned on an independent voice, a strong voice, if you will, and that I would make decisions in the best interest of the town. One of the obstacles that I face and what I feel now is that there is an absolute division in this town that, in my opinion, is despicable. And it's been brought on because of this type of talk about this board didn't do this or this board was incapable. I will quote the town manager that we did not renew his contract. He said to us, and you can fact check this if you want, that this board, that include myself and the other 2 gentlemen that were recalled, has done more than any other board he's seen since he's been here. And he came in 2012. So I'm proud of that.
Okay. Bob?
I think the biggest obstacle in the current campaign is that the townspeople are tired of disagreement, and they're looking for voices to inform the town of what we will do, work together to get it done. I think because of the intensity of the recall election, there's a sense that maybe on one side the problem is solved, and on the other side we have to fix the problem, which is the division issue. And to me, those are the two biggest obstacles, because they prevent us from paying attention collectively to what needs to be done and finding a way to work together to do it, which I think we're seeing in some of the discussion today.
Peter Buckley?
I think the question it was already asked of me in the beginning of this debate, and I've answered it, so I'm not going to answer any more on that one.
What was the second one then? Second biggest, the second biggest obstacle. This wasn't really targeted for you.
It was definitely, the biggest obstacles is getting through the day-to-day, letting the people know who is actually out for their best interests of the town, who has the experience to bring that forward to the town. And it's basically, yes, letting the people know that, but being in executive session on most of these decisions is not going to let the people know what's going on around in this town. You have to be open. The biggest obstacle right now is being forward with the people of this town, letting them know exactly what's going on step by step. Everything on that one, you can't do it behind closed doors. That's one of the biggest obstacles to try to get across to people right now.
Steve, you're answering your own question.
Yeah, sure. As I mentioned at the very beginning, I've been campaigning for 404 days now, and I've gone through 2 elections. One was the last one was as anybody who's watching this probably knows was absorbed a lot of energy from everybody. So for me, the biggest obstacle, honestly, has been just keeping up the momentum for this long and driving through for over a year on a local campaign. And how I got through was honestly having good friends, having an excellent campaign committee who have kept me motivated, helped me to think through the problems that I've had to face, and reaching out to a lot of the citizens of the town and doing the job currently as a selectman has opened me up to just how much work has to be done, and that was motivating. It was still very difficult though. Thanks.
Peter Brown, your turn to ask a question, and Bob will be the first one to answer.
Well, honestly, I have so many questions, and I think the taxpayers probably do too, but I think the question I'll ask this board is, one of the sticklers I've been, and I've been a supporter of public safety. We've worked very hard to put adequate numbers in place, both in the fire department and the police department. I guess my question for any members on this board is, how do you plan, or how will you protect the staffing issues? And I believe that there were a couple of positions cut this particular year, 2 and 2 in the fire, 2 in the police, I'm not certain. And I'd like to know if anybody on this board has any intention of privatizing the ambulance and getting rid of our firefighters as ambulance responders.
Bob, you're first.
Well, the immediate thing I can tell you is that through the budget process, we paid attention, at least I did, to the particular needs of these departments. And as I said earlier, we've asked both police and fire chief to develop department improvement plans to come in and tell us in detail what we need for staffing, training, equipment, and facilities going forward, so we can develop a sustainable financial plan to get these facilities in place. What we can't do any longer, and what I'm determined to prevent us from doing any longer, is looking at every budget cycle as an opportunity to add 1 or 2 and bargain over whether 1 or 2 with having no vision for what these departments are supposed to look like. And I've proposed a way to do that, a proposal that Mr. Brown actually opposed, and that was to target development for public safety purposes, and to say in key economic zones for the community, we will prioritize the new revenue from that development to improve funding for public safety. I'm committed to get that through.
Peter?
All right, so to answer your question, is to privatize anything? Is that what your question was, Peter?
I was curious about how we're going to maintain staffing,
Okay.
both on the police and fire side, because that's
Okay.
actually the job of the Board of
But
Selectmen.
basically it was just to prioritize. Privatize,
Do you have any
excuse me.
intention, or would you, because it's been discussed on by
Okay.
Mr. O'Regan?
I mean, I can
I've
answer that
never
right off the bat.
discussed privatizing. No, I haven't.
Why are you going to?
But
Why
the
do you
thing
make
is,
stuff up?
It's my turn.
Yeah, you
It's,
did.
It is up to the folks. Folks, hang on a minute.
To privatize, absolutely not. I mean, especially in the public safety side, on the fire department side, you have an ambulance account that's back up and running again. It's about 4 or 5 years ago, I'm not exactly sure when, they discontinued the enterprise account for the ambulance side on that. Now that that's up and working and needs to be a little bit more fine-tuned on the management side of that, but it's generating revenue. That's something that you need to grasp onto. It can alleviate some of the funding issues within the fire department, especially with staffing, or at least help with that and offset the cost of the staffing issues. You got to look within the departments. It was also said that look within the departments to see what is in there that can be used, not to only put it on the taxpayers' back, but to sit there and generate the revenue from within. It can be done. It's been done in other communities. It can be done here.
Steve?
Yeah, so I've told the story before on a while interviewed, so if you've already heard it, I apologize. But a couple of years ago, my wife and I woke up in the middle of the night to our young son, I think he was 2 or 3 years old, gasping for breath. And we called 911, terrified. And police and the ambulances came, brought him to the hospital. It ended up being croup, which is not a big deal, but it certainly was the scariest thing that's ever happened in my life. And the treatment we got from the firemen was amazing, and you don't get that from people who are doing that just as a day job. This is they're part of a community, and it was really special to us, and that we got that kind of attention and that kind of compassion. I absolutely support the fire and police that we have, and we're working to generate new revenue streams to help keep the staffing adequate. And in an ideal world, give them everything they needed. We don't have the resources all the time to do that, so we have to find the resources. Thank you.
Well, can I just correct?
I got to answer my question
Hang on a
first.
second.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Hang on.
I know you're going to try to attack me, so I want to
No,
hear
Peter,
the
not
Peter
you.
Brown, you can answer your own question.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm sorry.
The
And
economic development.
Then you can rebut if you like.
Well, then good, we all can do that. The economic development policy that was talked about addressing the police and fire needs didn't even come close to where we'd need to be. And it was only addressing certain areas of town, which was mentioned in the actual policy. Mr. O'Regan and I did work on, he worked on his version, I worked on my version. Neither one of us could come to an agreement, so it's important that I say that. Secondly, I want to make certain that the staffing levels continue to meet the day and age of the call volume. I'd like to see police back in the schools. Having one police officer at the high school does not meet the needs of today's issues. We need to provide additional monies to provide training so police can actually do training that involves the school, because it's not just about talking, it's not just about showing up the day of the event, God forbid something happens. We've been lucky in this town because every major event that's happened, for the most part, had happened on change or shift. And I'm talking about shootings, stabbings, officer-involved shootings.
I think that we're done on that. We have one more question, then we're going to go to closings. So go ahead, Jeff.
I just want to get one more current event sort of topic in there before we go to closing, and that was on last week, I believe it was Wednesday. There was a hearing in Norfolk Superior Court about the case of former town manager Michael Hartman versus the town of Stoughton. And it's a fairly short hearing, about 35 minutes long. And the topic of non-renewal versus termination kept coming up during that. It was pretty much the theme of that hearing. So what I'd like to ask you is that there isn't anything specific in the charter, and this was brought up during this hearing by all involved, that there's nothing specific in the charter that deals with the issue of non-renewal versus termination. So what I would like to ask each of you, would you be in favor of looking at the charter and adding something that clarifies the process that went on with the last town manager? Specifically, if the town manager's contract expires, what does the Board of Selectmen do about it? What
Bob,
does the town do?
This one goes to you. Now let's try to keep these fairly short. Good.
So the town manager is an appointed public office. It's not a regular employee. It's an appointed public office. The town charter identifies really 3 ways for someone who has been appointed to no longer have that office. And we're governed by our town charter. One is person dies, second is the person resigns, and the third way is that he's discharged. Those are the three ways the town charter says it should happen. In 25 seconds I have left, does this episode indicate we need to pay attention to it? It absolutely does, because we need to understand whether as a town we want to have town managers under a contract that creates this problem, or do we want to just have them under the town charter? If there weren't a contract, we wouldn't have this problem, because there wouldn't be anything to not renew. So I think the first beginning for us to evaluate is whether town managers can be, and if they are, then
Peter
what
Buckley.
happens?
A lot of discussion tonight about what should be changed. Our zoning should be changed. This should be changed. One of the most important things that needs to be looked at and changed, because some of it's outdated, is the town charter. In case in point is what's going on right now with the town manager, with the former town manager. We've got a lot of vague language that's in that town charter. Some of it is outdated. Some of it may even be contradictory to current Mass General law. That's a priority. It needs to be changed. Some language should be taken out of it. Some language needs to be added to it. As far as the contract, as far as the former town manager was, it was looked at. It was decided on. It is that they went with the contract. It was more of a contractual matter at that point, and not a matter to adhere to the town charter. He wasn't fired. He just was not renewed.
Steve?
Yeah, in my personal life, I actually do quite a bit of computer programming professionally, and what I found is that you kind of have this idea of what you want a program to do, and you write it, and then you find that some special case happens, and you didn't really account for, and it falls out as an error. And I think that when you do that, you then revise it. There's always a learning curve involved with that. I think the town charter is very similar in that respect. As problems arise, as we actually have cases upon which to ask these questions, it offers us a good opportunity to make changes that we think are necessary. In this case, to be honest, I really don't know if we need to make a change. If there's a precedent set by a judge's decision, I don't necessarily know that we necessarily need to make a change. But clarity is better than obfuscation. So if it needs to be cleared up, let's clear it up.
Peter?
Well, that's extremely interesting, because people campaigned and two Board of Selectmen led a charge for a recall stating that we were incorrect in our decision. First, a Superior Court judge ruled that we had the ability to do that, to not renew his contract. Second, in his contract, it clearly stated that as long as he was given 6 months' notice leading up to the date of expiration, which a contract has a date, and it's a binding contract for employment from point A to point B. And in this contract, it stated that if he was notified 6 months prior to his expiration date, we did not have to renew his contract. Now, what the charter said or not, the judge ruled that the contract was upheld. And I'm interested to see where this case goes, because I'm surprised it's even in court, because 5 people were opposed or basically said that we did wrong on that. So I'm surprised it's actually in front of a judge, given that.
Okay, it's time now for closing statements. And we're going to reverse the order that we started with, so it'll be Bob O'Regan starting it off.
Well, again, thank both of you for hosting this, and thanks all of you for watching and listening to us. When we started, I asked you to listen to the positions that the candidates offered you, because there really is an important question here on who do you rely on to lead your town as a $130 million business. What does the Board of Selectmen do to affect your everyday life? Public safety, tax base, zoning. Some of those topics can be daunting and some of them can be boring, but all of them are important. As you heard tonight's discussion, I ask you to pay attention to where you heard concrete, definite ideas for moving the town forward, and where you may have heard just double talk or imprecise descriptions or no information at all. I've been working for the past 6 years with a definite goal to increase the tax base, to get property tax relief for the homeowners, to improve public safety services for the community, to provide enough money for the school. So I ask your vote
Peter?
to continue that.
I want to thank the people of Stoughton for watching tonight. I hope you take away that I am an independent voice who understands the issues facing our town. I also recognize that we have a chair leading a board that is very comfortable in spending our tax dollars. It is very obvious that advancing personal agendas, paying back political allies, rewarding close friendship supporters, as well as trying to transform our town and drive away some of the hard-working folks is very much a priority of some. I will provide the open and transparency government that you seek. I ask for your vote on April 10th. I will return fiscal conservatism back to the Board of Selectmen. Thank you.
Steve?
Thank you very much. I appreciate you putting this together. First of all, I'd like to say that the last 4 months serving Stoughton has been an absolute pleasure. And I appreciate the trust that you put in me, and I hope I lived up to that, to your expectations. I think we've had a very productive 4 months. In this time, we've been able to submit a balanced budget. We've gotten through all the through the warrant, putting the articles together for the warrant, on time. We've had a really successful time working with Mark Tisdale, who's the interim town manager we hired at the very beginning of our terms. I hope to continue to work, and continue the work I've started. And I hope I've earned your vote. Thank you very much.
Peter?
Thank you. Thank you, Jeff and Mark, for hosting tonight, and Smack, obviously, for letting us be here tonight. I look forward to hitting the ground running and being a contributing member of the Board of Selectmen. On day one, I'll begin to work with other members to reach out to people in the private sector to make contacts with people experienced in bringing new growth to our town. We have an economic director and a planning director, and as your selectman, I believe it is my job and our job to support these employees by providing the resources and by letting them do their job. That's most important, is to let the people do their job. And just to close on that note too, as far as, like Mr. O'Regan said, a lot of the answers here tonight were either double talk or unanswered at all. I can honestly say that if you do watch this, that the majority of that came from the two incumbents. And I do ask for your vote on April 10th. Thank you.
I want to thank Michael Hammond, C.J. Mullen, Dave Young, and Jeffrey Pickett for helping here. Christine Iacobucci, thank you very much for the timing, being a timekeeper. And we have 4 good people who actually care about the town that are running for the office, and they deserve one thing from you, to go vote on April 10th. So please go do that. And thank you very much for watching. It's been a pleasure to come back to Stoughton. Bye, everybody.